Away. My name's Josh Osborne and welcome to the CI Tools weekly webinar. I'm the product manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation. And what this webinar is that every week we go through sort of a handful of things that we've been hearing about on support a lot recently, or just that people have been wondering about how to do, that I thought would be good to demonstrate so that you can get an idea of what things you can do with the tools, maybe things that you don't know about or that you've tried and had trouble or something like that. And one of the things that I'm also looking for during these webinars is if you think of anything while we're running through this stuff that you would like to see covered in future ones. Say you want to learn how to do a certain thing with your coverings or design a certain kind of window or something. Anything you think of like that, please do just let me know either during the webinar or contact us via the support desk sometime after the webinar, and I can slot those into future versions of this. I'm going to be working in ArchiCAD 24 today, but everything that I'm going to look at will also work in ArchiCAD 23 and 22 as well. So if you are using older versions, everything that we're going to look at today also applies to them. And I will be recording this webinar and uploading it to MyCI probably midway through next week, so that you can go back there and refresh your memory or watch just a part of it that you missed or something like that. That'll be on the MyCI website under My Select Benefits and in the Downloads section. Sorry, the video section. If you have any questions at all or comments to add, just enter those in the chat panel. I won't be answering those as we go through. I will go through what I'm looking at first, and then I'll look at those questions at the end. If there's any that come in that are about something that I know how to tell you, then I'll answer those live, and anything else I'll get back to you after the webinar runs. So let's get started. Today what we're going to look at is a couple of things to do with the Keynotes tool. I heard a couple of questions recently about some of the functions of that. So we're going to look at that. And before we get into that, we're just going to quickly look at some stuff to do with Durham Windows schedules, which has also come up this week. If you have attended a bunch of these, you might have already seen, I think in one of the first ones, I looked at Durham Windows schedules and applying notes to those. So for those of you who saw that one already or already know how to do that, I'll very quickly go over that part. So do stick around if you already know that bit, because we're going to look at some stuff also to do with how you manage the schedule and edit it as well. But first of all, I will just show you how the schedule notes works, because that's something that I think a lot of people are just starting to pick up and use now. So it's worth going over that again. The best way to work with schedule notes is via the palette. So if you go to your CI Tools menu, Doors and Windows, and hit the Schedule Notes palette, that will come up. And you can see your schedule notes here. These are just a couple that I sort of made up as examples, but obviously you can make whatever you like using the Schedule Notes Manager. Just hit New Note or New Category here, and you can create those on the fly and drag and drop them between categories as you need to. What I'm going to do here is, now that I'm looking at my schedule, you may know there's two ways to apply notes to your doors and windows. One of them is to select the window or door that you're interested in your model view, and go to the CI Tools Schedule Notes section here and click Add, and that will let you add a note to your window or door. But the other way to do it is to add them in the schedule, and that's what I'm going to do now. So I've got my schedule notes palette open and I've got live edit turned on, which means that any changes that I make are going to be applied to the windows and doors that I'm looking at as I go, rather than selecting a bunch, making a change, and then pushing the change to them, which is what we sort of call manual edit mode. But I'm going to work with live for now. So the way that works is quite similar to how our Keynotes tool works. So if you're familiar with that, this will be quite familiar to you. Select the window or door that you want to apply the notes to. And down at the bottom here, it'll show you any notes that are currently attached. At the moment, there aren't any, but that's where they'll show. And then you can just double click on the notes you want to attach, and you can see that those are showing up immediately as I add those. Then I can go to another window and add some different notes. And you can go through your whole model doing it this way. Now, one of the tricks that you need to be aware of with this is that at the moment, all we're dealing with is the schedule. When we apply these notes, all they're doing is applying themselves to the schedule elements, not the actual doors or windows themselves. So once you've done any work in here with your schedule notes, what you're going to want to do is select all of the elements that you've added notes to and hit this little button here. It's got kind of a little 4-line thing to indicate a note on the left, and then an arrow going to our model to indicate send it to the actual model data with the arrow going into that. Hit that, and what it's going to do is it's going to send those notes into the model. So if I were now to go into my floor plan and find window 100 and 101, those notes will now be part of them. And now that I say that, I'm probably not going to be able to find, no, here we are. There's 100. So if I open that one up, you can see that those two notes I added are there now. So those are inherently part of that window now, as are the ones on 101. And you can see, because my palette is still open, that's showing in the preview down here as well. And you can make the changes to them in the floor plan view in the same way in this palette as you do in the schedule notes. It's just that if you're doing it in the actual schedule, you need to remember to push them back before you do an update, otherwise you're going to lose those changes. So that's an important one to keep an eye on. Now the next thing I wanted to show you in the schedule is that now that I've got some notes here, I want to mess around with how they appear. And so what I can do is I can select this model element, this schedule element, and go into here, and you can see there's some control over the way that the note is displayed. So we've got the offset for the ID, the offset below the ID, the width of the column, the width of the gutter, and then the width of the right column. So we can go through and we can set the widths for those. You can see in the preview here, if I make changes to those, they're going to move around to do what you'd expect them to do. So you can go through and set those up to look however you want them to. Let's add in a gap there and hit OK. And you can see that now that I've hit OK, it has made the changes that I asked it to. There's a bit more padding in here. The gutter is quite a lot wider now. And one of the things that, if you've done this before, you might know, is that as soon as you update your schedule, what's going to happen is that you're going to lose that data. So the thing to keep in mind when you're working in Doors or Windows schedules is that what you're looking at is a schedule that has been built, but it's sort of it's built on the fly every time you update the schedule. It's not a thing in itself, if that's an unusual way of phrasing it, but this schedule itself is just a reflection of the schedule settings and the model elements underneath. The schedule itself is not remembered beyond what you can see currently. So as soon as you update it, it rebuilds it from nothing, and any changes that you made in here will not be remembered. So if you modify that width there, it's not going to remember that change. You can see now that I've done the rebuild that those have gone back to normal. And so the way that you can make those changes affect everything is that you need to apply the changes to everything in this view. So if you select one of the elements here and then hit Control-A or Command-A on your keyboard to select everything and then go through and make the changes, these changes are going to stick. So let's just change the width of the left column and the gutter so that it's nice and easy to see what we've done. So you can see very obviously that's a lot narrower now and the gutter's a lot wider. And now if I update this schedule, it will have, because I applied it to everything in that view, it will remember that now, because it sort of takes kind of the average, as it were, of what it thinks the settings that apply to everything should be. So just bear in mind when you're working in the schedule, if you make changes to any single element and then you update the list, it's not going to remember that change. You will need to go through and select everything and make that change to all for it to survive updating. Now, obviously, you can make changes to individual elements, and those will take effect in the view. It's just that when you do an update, you're going to lose that as well. So if you do need to make changes to individual schedule items here, you can of course do that, but it's best to leave that until the very end of the process, when you know you're not going to need to update it again, because they will disappear as soon as you update. So that's just kind of a trick to watch out for, and remembering, of course, that if you do apply schedule notes as well while you're in here, you'll also lose those unless you push them back to the model by using this button. All right, so that's the Durham Windows Schedule stuff that I wanted to quickly look at. The next thing that I want to look at is the Keynotes tool. And there's a couple of things to do with Keynotes, mostly to do with notes to begin with. Sorry, labels to begin with. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to place a couple of labels and show you how to work with label styles, which you might not have used before. So I'm going to open my Keynotes palette, and I've just imported the default sample database of notes here, so nothing fancy. I'll go through and select a couple of notes so that we can see how they look. So let's place down 3 or 4 of those so you can see what we're dealing with. All right, so you can see they're placed down. They all look pretty much the same. Text is the same. The amount of data that's shown is the same, all that sort of thing. Now, label styles are a thing that will let you quickly and easily set and change the way that your labels look. It works quite similarly to how a favorite does. However, you can't use favorites for these labels because favorites also remember the content of the label. So if you apply a favorite, say from this one into here, it's going to make it look the same, but it's also going to make the note 30404. It won't be the note that it was anymore. So that's what our style system is there for, is to apply just the style change but still keep the note data. So the way that works is you can see it down at the bottom here of our Keynotes palette. I'm going to select this first element here, and I'm going to save a style for this one here. So I'm just going to choose new style. I will call this one vanilla because it's our default. Whoops, I did that when I was testing already, so I'm going to actually call it vanilla 1. And then I'm going to update that. So now this style is saved as vanilla 1. Selecting this label here, I can apply vanilla 1 to it, but it already was that setting, so that's not going to make any difference. So what I'll do is I'll make this a different style. So I'll go into the settings for that label. I'm going to turn off the title. I'm going to make it just a key, and I'm going to write the word note at the beginning. And I think I'll also set the header to be bold and a different color, just so that we can see the difference as we go. And I'll make the frame orange. Now, because I've made some changes to the colors here, I'm also going to have to go in here and turn off this option here, which overrides the colors. And I'll hit OK, and now you can see I've got a label with the nice bold note at the beginning, then just the key, and I've got a red frame around it. So I'm going to select this one now. I'm going to say new style, and I'm going to give that a name and update it. So now I have 2 styles. So if I go back to the first one, which we set vanilla from, I can come in here and I can choose strawberry, which is the new one, and hit apply, and that will immediately apply that change. So you can see we're now red and bold, and we just have a key, but it's still 30306, not 30401. So it hasn't nuked our settings. It's just changed the style, and we can easily change back to vanilla by just selecting it and applying it. And same goes to getting this back to normal as well. Just apply that one. So it's kind of a 2-step process for each. You go in and choose the style that you want, and then hit apply. And you can go through and do that with as many things as you want to. So we could set another label, which is a sort of a full detail one. Let's go with that, and make the title bold so it's easier to spot. Actually, these notes might only have a title, but that's fine. Okay, and I will save that color. So you can see now this one's got the full detail, and I will make another new one. Apologies for the terrible style naming scheme. That's all I could think of at the time. And now again, we can just make those changes on the fly just by selecting the style and then applying it to whatever we want to. So that's Keynote Styles. You can see this one here actually has a description in it, so you can see that description that was part of the setup earlier has gone in as italics now. So you can use this system to go through and set up your notes to be whatever you want, and then very quickly change them. You can select multiples and make changes to all of them as well, or just change them individually as you go to suit whatever style you want, quickly and easily, and without losing your actual database link. So it's a great way of working with how your Keynote labels look. One of the other things, just while we're looking at this label, before I move on to the next thing, is just I wanted to quickly look at the hotspots that are in this label. It can be a little confusing possibly if you're trying to set this out. You can see we've got our normal 4 hotspots around the outside of the frame, plus these 2 at the level of the leader line. But there's these 3 sort of inner hotspots here, which it may not be obvious what they're for. So what these do are, the first one here is going to allow you to modify the frame margin. So that is how much of a margin the frame is going to have before it hits the text. So you can modify that to be big and add quite a lot of padding, or you can move it out to just put a nice sort of nice cushion around the outside, or pull it all the way down to 0 so that it's hard up against the frame. The second one will let you adjust where the tab is. So you can see as I move this along, this is actually resizing vertically because I'm making the width narrower, which means that it will need to be longer. So if I make that change, you can see that the tab is shifted out there now. You can pull it back to whatever you need to. And the last one, which I lost temporarily because I turned that padding down to 0, the last one here will let you modify the actual width of the frame itself. And you can see as I resize this, it's getting narrower vertically because, again, obviously because of the wrapping, it doesn't require as many lines because it's much wider, and you can come in and squish it all the way up here as well. So that's just not something that you might have noticed immediately while working with notes, but should be relatively easy to work with now that you know that they're there. Just make sure that when you do use them, when the pet palette comes up, you use this arrowy move node option rather than this one, because that's just going to drag the entire node. So that's the frame margin, the tab width, and the frame width. You can control from there. All right, now the next thing I wanted to look at, and I think I may have covered this in one of the webinars as well, but it's worth going over again because I've had some more questions about it recently, and that's the audit tool, the Keynote Audit tool. And this is kind of almost the magical part about the Keynotes tool, is that you can use this audit function to make sure that everything is doing what you've told it to. So one of the things that without using our Keynotes tool is kind of a headache when you're working with notes, especially if the way that you're working with them is just by like copying and pasting in from Word or something, is that there's always the possibility that a label somewhere may not correspond to a schedule element somewhere else telling you the data about it, and that it also may not correspond to some other instance of the same label somewhere else in the model. You make changes to one of your label and you have to go through and make sure that that's updated everywhere that label is used. That sort of thing can be a real headache. And so what the audit tool is for going through and double checking that everything is still correct. Generally, when you make changes, you would probably just audit as you go. So you won't need to use this to fix a large amount generally, but if you have been doing a lot of edits or you're bringing together a lot of different elements into a single file or something like that, it can be very good just to click at the end before you publish to ease your peace of mind that everything is still intact. And so the way that the audit tool works is via this. There's kind of a icon of a list of notes with a tick on it. And what you do is you just click on this button and it's going to bring up the audit controls here. And at the moment, what we're seeing, you can see we can control what it's going to show in this view and whether it's applying to selected elements or everything or some subset of that. And at the moment, it's showing me BIM Intro Training Batch, which is just the title of this project. Then we've got 30306 line of slab, because that's what I have selected. And floor plan 1 ground floor, that's this placed instance of the layout label. It's just telling me where that is. So if I refresh that, now that I've deselected it, it's going to show all the keynotes. So there's 4 of them at the moment, and it shows me what each one is and where it is in my project. So even before we've actually run an audit, this is telling you where all of your labels are. So if you do need to find a label or something like that, say you don't know where a placed label is, you can select one of these. Let's say we want to find 30404. At the moment, it's only placed in one place in the ground floor, so I can select that and then press zoom to, and it'll automatically find it and zoom to the view where it is. So if you're trying to locate missing labels or anything like that, this is a very nice and quick way of doing that. But that's not the main thing that the audit tool is for. The main thing that this is for is to, as it says, audit your database to make sure that everything still makes sense. So at the moment, everything is showing in black, which means that the audit hasn't found any problems. And we can hit refresh to double check at any time. But it's not going to show us anything because we don't have anything that has become out of sync at the moment. But what I can do, for example, is let's say note 30401 PC stairs. Going to open my database. Oops. Okay. I'll leave the ID as it is, and I'm going to update the title of that. So now 30401 says some text. Obviously, we're just displaying the key at the moment, so we can't see that it says some text. But if I run the auditor now, you'll see that there is something that is not black and white showing up now. And anything that's not black and white means it has found some sort of problem. So in this case, it's saying that note 30401, which is placed on the ground floor in the floor plan view, has changed. So that means that the data that's inside that particular note has changed since that label was placed. So the label is no longer correct anymore. So we can zoom to it, obviously, to go and select that note and see what it looks like. And then we can hit the repair button to automatically fix the note. Obviously, we didn't see any change there because we were only showing the key. But if I do the same thing with something else, 30402, let's just edit that to say some garbage. And then a refresh our audit, you'll see that 30402 placed on the ground floor. You can see it still says steel stairs, hand basin, etc. But that is no longer what the actual note says in the database. So again, it says changed, and we can hit repair and it instantly updates to reflect that change. This also applies, what else have we got here? So 30401, this time instead of making a change to the note, I'm going to delete the note entirely. So click delete, it gives me a warning saying that you can't undo that. I'm going to say okay, because I definitely do want to do that. And now if I refresh my auditor, you'll see that I've got a nice pink thing here now. And again, because it's not black and white, it means it's found something. So we've got an orphaned note. And what that means in the context of Keynotes is that it has essentially lost its parent. It's a label without anything that it is connected to anymore. So this tells us that it's placed on floor plan ground floor. We can zoom to it, to select it and see what it's doing. And we can see that the status is orphaned. And because this doesn't have a note to link to, if I hit repair now, it's just going to remove the note entirely because, the label entirely, because the note that it was linked to doesn't exist anymore. So obviously you can choose not to repair that if you do want orphaned notes in your database, in your project, but that's generally not something that I would want. Generally, probably the way that I would want to fix that is if we just quickly do it again with Brickwork. We'll do that, refresh there, so Brickwork is showing. Now we'll delete the Brickwork note, refresh it, and you can see it's orphaned. What I would do in this case is I would select it, so zoom to it. It's going to show me what is currently remembered in the label but isn't a thing anymore, and I'll go through and find what it should be showing instead. Let's say 30306 and swap it out to that, and now we have a label still in exactly the same place, still using the same style as before, but we have inserted the proper note that it should refer to now. So this is a good way if you've been working on your database and you've got notes that are deleted, this is how you can swap into the new versions, is by just running through your auditor tool, finding those things that need to be swapped out for something else, and then doing that rather than just going through and repairing to remove everything. That can be a good way of doing it as well if that's what you want to achieve, but if what you want to achieve is to swap them to something more appropriate, then using the selection and zooming to and then replacing them with different notes is the way to go there. All right, so that was the auditor tool. The other thing that I just quickly wanted to show you, I'll just demonstrate it very quickly. So if we make changes to a couple of elements, which one did I just change? Line of slab 30404. So I made changes to two different things now, so you can see that those are showing now. Line of slab is showing changed twice because I have that particular note placed twice now, and 30404 is showing one. What you can do is, and this is just something that someone asked about, and it's not immediately obvious in the tool, but if you hit repair here without them selected, it's going to go through and do everything. So you don't have to zoom to and select each thing that you want to go through in the auditor tool. Just hit repair and it'll go through and do the whole lot, and then we can refresh and we can see that it's made the changes. What did I actually do? I added the word text to the end, so it's done that. So if you are auditing, you don't have to do it one by one. You can just do it all at once as well. Now the last thing that I wanted to quickly show is the attribute keynotes, which is just something that I'm not sure that a lot of people know exists. So I'll just go over that very quickly. But if you do have any questions, enter those in the chat panel now, and I'll get to those in a minute or two once I've quickly looked at the attribute notes. So attribute notes is something that you might want to set up in your project. And what it does is, rather than selecting a note and attaching it to some element, it works kind of the other way around. It attaches certain notes to elements, and then you can pull labels out of them, but they always inherently know what notes are attached to them. So it will make sense probably more if I show it to you. So at the moment, let's go with this wall here. So this wall is using Instud 90 composite, which uses a building material we called timber wall, I believe. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell the project that anything that contains the building material timber wall will inherently have a certain kind of note attached to it. So the way that we do that is by opening the Keynotes Manager. This is where you will have imported or linked your notes in the first place. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Attribute Keynotes. And you can see over on the right here, we've got a selection of what attribute we want to work with. So I'm going to choose building materials, and it's already selected because I did this earlier. You select the building material that you want to work with. So timber wall is what we want to use, and then choose what notes you want to attach. You can attach more than one. Let's say internal walls, that kind of makes sense. Let's throw in some other things that don't necessarily make sense, just so that you can see what's going on. And obviously you can go through and set this for any and all of the building materials that you want in your project. Hit OK now, and what we have now is exactly no change in our floor plan view, because it is adding a little bit of metadata to this wall, but it's not displaying it right now. So if I select the wall, you'll see down under my label contents section here, which normally when you select a label, it shows you what's in the label, and it shows it in black text here. If I select this wall here, you'll see the label contents are all showing in gray, which means that they're hidden currently, and they're all showing this kind of cube with bricks in it. And that icon there means that these particular contents are coming from an attribute note rather than from a note that you've attached manually. And so all you need to do now is click the visibility button, and it's automatically going to attach notes to, I had 3 walls selected because they're in a group. It's going to attach notes to all 3 of those walls with all of the notes that are attached to it. So you can very quickly and easily label a bunch of your elements using these element keynotes. And then if you need to, you can edit those somewhat, so you could go through and hide certain notes out of them. They're still going to know that they're associated with them, so you can see it still knows that 31303 is part of it. It's just not being shown right now. So this can be a very quick and easy way, if you have this set up in advance, of going through and just labeling up a bunch of elements in your project just by selecting them. If I can actually select a wall. Who would have think it would be so hard? Just by selecting them and hitting the visibility button. And that's going to automatically label those all up for us. So it can make things nice and easy if you have that set up in advance by just going through the attribute keynote settings there and applying things that you would think are sensible. Obviously, you can use this in combination with ordinary notes as well, so you don't have to attach attribute notes to everything. You may just have a couple of things that you know you're always going to want to have those. So you could go through and attach those that way and put them in your template file or something like that. So that's the attribute keynotes. I'm just going to quickly have a look at the questions now and see if we've got anything that I can cover here. Is there a template available with Keynotes? So what you're looking at here is the notes database that we build, that we not built into the tool, but that we install with the tool. It's a kind of a relatively sensible looking set of notes for the sort of thing that you might want to use. I know that several people do use this as their notes database and just modify it on the fly. It's not really intended to be that, because we can't really predict what would be sensible for all of our customers. But this is a kind of a starting point database, I would say, that you can go with. They're probably, I don't know what database we could include that would apply to enough people to make it of use, but if there is such a thing, I'm definitely open to suggestions of how we could get something like that, because having it be as useful as possible out of the box is definitely a good thing. Obviously, if you use a product spec, smart spec, or master spec, you can link those in as well. So if you already make your Keynotes databases in one of those 2 systems, you can link those in. If you use some other system, you can generally export those as a CSV file, and our tool will allow you to import those as well. So if you have some notes already written up somewhere in a spreadsheet or something like that, you can get them from there as well. But at this stage, this is what we have by default. There's quite a lot in there, and it is relatively sensible. It covers off most of the areas you probably would want to. So if you don't have a notes database already and you don't have one you can export from somewhere, import this one and then go through and just make changes as needed. You can delete whole sections of it that you want and add new ones or anything like that, and then just whenever you get to the point that you're ready, you can export that for it to be ready to import it into all your other projects. So yeah, but if you do have suggestions for like any sort of notes database that is generally available to people that we could maybe see if we could bundle in or have links to in the tool to allow you to link into, I would love to hear about anything like that. I'm just not aware of anything at this stage that you could use for that. All right. That looks like that's all the questions we have for now. I don't actually have the SmartSpec add-on installed at the moment. I don't think. I do. The way that it works, well, actually no, my login isn't working at the moment because I've been using it for testing. The way that the SmartSpec and MasterSpec links work is that when you want to import your database in the Keynotes Manager, you choose the link option rather than import because it's going to be a live link rather than a one-off import. Hit link, choose which type you want, and it'll bring up a login window, and you just enter your login for either SmartSpec or MasterSpec Online, which has a name, master key. Enter your master key login or your SmartSpec login. And once you do that, it will then, if I did have my login handy and could do it, what it would do then is it would pop up a list of your projects, and then you select the project that you want to import, and it will come in, and it'll look exactly like this. The only difference there will be that instead of saying project keynotes, because this is saying that these are keynotes that are embedded in the project, it'll have a little globe icon instead, and it'll have the name of the SmartSpec or MasterSpec project there instead. And those notes will work exactly the same as you would expect them to do. After that, though, the only difference being that if you are using SmartSpec notes, they're not editable inside ArchiCAD. So if you want to make changes to those, you need to log into MasterKey, make the changes online, and then hit this sync button here to refresh the link to bring in those new changes, and then you can go for it with there. If you've changed any notes that are in labels that are already placed, you can then run the audit tool and go through and repair. You'll see a bunch of change. If you do that, just hit the repair button and that'll go through and propagate all of the changes that you've made online. But yeah, that's roughly how it works. Sorry, I don't have the login handy, but once you do get past that login screen, it's just a matter of selecting the project that you want to bring in and hitting OK pretty much, and then it does the rest after that. Right, I hope that answered your question. If you do have any other questions, feel free to send those through to our support desk, nz.support@centralinnovation.com. And someone in the support team there can either answer your question or forward it on to me and I'll answer your question. And as I said earlier, the recording will be available online sometime next week so that you can go and review that. If you do have any questions about stuff that came up in this as well, just mention that in your support ticket. Just say, hey, I watched the recording. They showed me how to do X. Could you elaborate on that or something like that? And we can help you out with anything like that. Thank you very much for your time, though. If you do have any other suggestions for other things that we could show in these future versions of this webinar, let us know on the support desk as well. That would be much appreciated, and we can go through those in future sessions. Thank you, and I hope to catch you next time.